Hello guys, my name is Joe. Going into its final season, Game of Thrones advertising heavily features dragons, White Walkers, and the Army of the Dead, and it's shaping up to be a true epic fantasy. But if you look back on earlier seasons, especially the first, magic played almost no role in the story. Sure, it was always there, but it was always in the background. In fact, one of the early draws to the show was its gritty realism. People would say if you take the magic out of it, then the characters and the world they lived in could have existed on our world just a few hundred years ago. But could it? Well, no. But actually, yes. If you want the reasoning behind those answers, you're going to have to stay and watch the rest of the video. There are lots of things that go into making a fictional world, and we don't have time to cover all of them. So we're only going to look at two main factors to determine the realism of Game of Thrones. The size of Westeros in both land and population, and then real-world examples that inspired the show and the books. Let's start with the basics of the continent of Westeros. Now these are going to be somewhat rough estimates just for the sake of simplicity. Now Westeros' exact size and population are a little hard to pin down. That's because exact numbers are rarely given in the books or in the show. And author George R.R. Martin has given out information that conflicts with itself and often doesn't add up. But thanks to some dedicated fans, we have some pretty good estimates to go off of. First off is Westeros' size. Martin has said in interviews that Westeros is roughly the size of South America, which is big. 6.9 million square miles big, or 11.1 million square kilometers for all you smarty pants metric users. It's not clear if Martin was talking about specifically the Seven Kingdoms or the whole continent. However, he has also said that the lands north of the Wall are equal to roughly the size of Canada, which would make them 3.9 million square miles, or 6.2 million square kilometers. So combining both those numbers and looking at different maps and travel times to various locations from the show and the books, most fans have come to the conclusion that the continent is 6.9 million square miles big, and that the Seven Kingdoms by themselves are 3 million square miles, or 4.8 million square kilometers, which is still massive. For context, the entire continent of Europe is only 3.9 million square miles. Now let's look at population, which is again hard to determine. Midway through the show, Jaime Lannister pretty clearly states,
500,000. The population of King's Landing.
However, in a later episode, Tyrion Lannister also claims,
how many people live here?
A million, give or take.
So there is some uncertainty. But if we take the more conservative number of 500,000 and we extrapolate it based on the number of cities we know about, how much land there is, and real-world counterparts, we get a rough population of the Seven Kingdoms as 40 million. And those numbers cause all sorts of new problems for the realism of Westeros. Now, nobody knows the exact period that they would say Game of Thrones would have taken place in, but people use the words Middle Ages, Medieval, Dark Ages a lot, and the problem with that is all those time periods overlap and they cover a long time. So, to give Westeros its best chance, we're going to look at Western Europe around the year 1300 AD, which, if you don't know, is right before the Black Plague came through and drastically reduced the population of Europe. We already said that Europe is 3.9 million square miles, and no royal family has ever ruled over enough of it to even come close to the Seven Kingdoms. France at the time, which was one of the biggest kingdoms, was still under 250,000 square miles, or 400,000 square kilometers. And I know what you're saying. The Seven Kingdoms are called that because they are made up of 7 smaller individual kingdoms. But a key point of the show, and one that drives much of the plot, is the fact that they have had a single ruling king for hundreds of years, and nothing that size has existed in medieval Europe. Westeros' next problem is population. And remember, there are 500,000 people crammed into King's Landing, and Martin has told us to imagine King's Landing like medieval London. The problem is, London's population around the year 1300 AD peaked at 100,000, 1/5 the size of King's Landing. And if we look at Paris, one of the biggest cities in Western Europe at the time, it still only had 200,000 people, less than half of what the show claims. And that problem is compounded by the fact that the 40 million number we talked about earlier dwarfs the populations of medieval kingdoms like England and France at 7 and 13 million respectively. All in all, it's not looking good for Game of Thrones realism. But do you remember earlier in the video when I said, well, no, but actually yes? We are now on the but actually yes part of the video. Because even though on its face Game of Thrones looks like a medieval epic, and even though Martin has said it is so, if you want to find the real-world counterpart for Westeros, you shouldn't look at England or France in the 1300s. You need to take the clock and turn it back a little over 1,000 years. The Roman Empire. specifically the Roman Empire between the years 100 and 200 AD. Yes, even though Westerosi don't dress like Romans, and they have knights not centurions, and kings not emperors, as described in the show, Westeros is basically the Roman Empire with a medieval makeover. First off is size. The Roman Empire peaked at 117 AD around 1.9 million square miles, or 3 million square kilometers. And that is still smaller than Westeros, but it is a lot closer than any medieval kingdoms came. And it was ruled by one person, an emperor. Next, we have population. The capital of the Roman Empire was Rome, and Rome and King's Landing have many similarities. Roughly the center of their respective territories, with easy land access via roads to their surroundings. And remember how Tyrion said the population of King's Landing was 1 million? Well, the population of Rome during the 2nd century AD was also 1 million. And remember that massive overall population, 40 million, we talked about earlier? Well, historians estimate that in 164 AD, the population of the Roman Empire was over 60 million, even though they occupied a third less territory. And events in the show even mirror events from this time period. One of the main conflicts from earlier seasons of the show was the civil war known as the War of Five Kings, named so because there were 5 different men who all claimed to be king. And the 2nd century marked several Roman civil wars, in particular one in the year 193 that historians refer to as the Year of Five Emperors, because there were 5 different men who all claimed the title of emperor. This was also the time when Roman generals, instead of fighting the Germanic tribes in the north, started inviting them into their armies in exchange for money and land. And we all know of another northern general who invited his enemies into his army in exchange for land. But for me, the single best reasoning for the Roman Empire being the real-world equivalent of Westeros is that George R. R. Martin has said that one of his earliest inspirations to write the books came from his visit to Hadrian's Wall in northern England. He said he imagined himself as a Mediterranean soldier standing on it and wanted to write a story about the people who guard the edge of the world. Hadrian's Wall, if you don't know, was built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the year 193. Actually, I don't think he built any of it himself. He probably paid people to do it. Or used slaves. Wasn't actually a very fun time to be alive. Which is another similarity with Game of Thrones. I wouldn't want to be alive there either. Or dead there. I know there might be better examples out there, but this one was my favorite. If you guys like this video, give it a like and leave a comment down below. If you want to see more videos about fictional stories versus history, or stories supposedly based in truth, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when I make new videos. And if you want to help me make new videos, I just started a Patreon. I'm going to leave the link in the description below. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thanks for watching.